Hey everyone, welcome back to the Power Hour podcast. I'm super excited today because you won't see it, but I've taken a bit of a break from the podcast. I've been on holiday and stuff and just kind of working abroad for a little bit. So it's been nice to come back in the studio. And I've got a super special guest today, Josh Giles, Power Platform Solution Architect. Josh, so happy to have you on. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Doing great, thank you. Yeah, sunshine and lovely weather. So what a good day to
Absolutely.
do a podcast,
Can't
right?
complain. Can't complain in the UK whatsoever. Josh, I'm gonna get right into it because when I was doing some research and looking you up, I saw that you almost had a relatively traditional path to the Power Platform, working in IT. And please don't correct me if I'm wrong, but working in IT support, gravitating a little bit more towards engineering roles from what I saw, software engineering,
Yeah,
I believe, and then naturally progressing to Power Platform. So I'm really curious about that journey, and if you could walk us through, that would be great.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, love talking about my journey into Power Platform and how I've got here. And yeah, I mean, much like a lot of people that have got into Power Platform space, it's not the most traditional of ways in. So, um, casting my mind back, I obviously left school. Went to college, studied public services at college with the intention of possibly going into the armed forces, and then kind of transitioned as a bit of a summer job doing technical support for a company called Novatech in Portsmouth. That was really interesting. Kind of cut my teeth on, hardware support, transitioned into a bit more of a customer service role, doing technical support on the phones. Um, and then into like the business support side of things, some more like server side support, that type of thing, which is really interesting. I learned so much the kind of fresh out of college, so that was really good. I then took a bit of a break from technology at that point. Didn't know if it was for me. Thought, you know what, I'll try something else. My dad works in construction as a ceiling fixer and partitioner, so I tried that for good while, just over a year, I think. So went down that route. Really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of sort of parallels between that and kind of like solution stuff in Power Platform. You know, building stuff, bringing stuff together, seeing that end result. It was really good.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that. So that was great. And then decided to move up to Scotland, which then just kind of again shifted me back into a bit more of an office-based role, kind of back into technology. So I ended up at an MSP doing all sorts of managed service support for customers, different kind of verticals, different areas. Which is really fun. Again, learn a lot in that space in IT support. Um, and then just kind of bounce between different types of roles in that kind of space up until about 2017, 2016-ish, when I then kind of ended up taking kind of a bit of ownership on some SharePoint stuff, and that was the real kind of transition from
Mm,
traditional infrastructure support into software for me. So ended up taking on some SharePoint support, got really interested in SharePoint at the time. Wow, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I love this. So did SharePoint for a little bit, intranets, document management, all that good stuff. And then around 2017-ish, I think it was, when Power Platform, Power Apps came to be, so when I kind of jumped on the boat and started playing around with Canvas apps. And yeah, at that point, managed to get a role in a more traditional kind of software consultancy. I was at Synergy. That was really great. Again, managed to kind of cut my teeth on all things Power Platform and a bit of SharePoint stuff as well. It was great. First kind of exposure to Dataverse, or Common Data Service as it was known back then. And yeah, then just kind of went upwards from that point, really, up to where I am now, and just kind of newly joined Virgin Money.
yeah.
So doing stuff in that space there with them, which is really great, really enjoying it. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind of a journey, and it's such a privilege to be where I am now. I think I don't take it for granted. You know, I'm not formally educated in terms of things like university or anything like that. Everything's self-taught learning, and just through that kind of hard work and dedication and my passion for the Power Platform really has kind of got me to where I am. So I'm forever grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting journey, and I think one a lot of people listening can relate to. I mean, here on the Power Hour podcast, I try my best to extract those moments of gold that you had on that journey, because I feel like a lot of people would find that valuable. But just for people who are currently existing within the Power Platform space, so people who have made it into developer roles, into architect roles, less so architect roles, sorry, entry level Power Platform roles, juniors and developers and consultants. You are now a solution architect. How did you make that jump, and what does that person need to make that jump, right? Because it can be very difficult to kind of quantify the specific skills and things you need to make that jump. So how do you go from like consultant developer up to an architect level?
Yeah, it's such a it can be such a challenge in terms of kind of working your way up the way. And one of the things I really like to kind of advocate for is, the skill set that it takes to get to a more senior level isn't just about what you know. You need to be a lot more well-rounded in your skill set. So the soft skills play a massive part, and I attribute that to kind of how I've managed to get to where I am now. And in the part, I'm a very kind of firm believer as anyone could learn the technology. A Power Platform, anything. Anyone can learn that. We've got all the tools at our disposal. If anyone's wanting to put the effort in, they can learn that. But soft skills takes a lot of effort to learn and get it right. And it's something that I'm continually learning and kind of understanding myself. But yeah, I think without that side of things, I certainly wouldn't have been able to move up in seniority in roles. The amount of times you've been working on a project, or you've met with people and they are so switched on technically, but they just lack almost like basic skills. So they just don't know how to talk to people or talk to stakeholders, and that skill is really valuable in the world when you start going up the way, and you're dealing with these kind of key stakeholders, senior management, executive level kind of people. You need to know how to communicate to them. And that's
Yeah,
what I really think is one of the biggest benefits that you could learn as an entry level kind of developer or power platform, developer, whatever it is get on top of that kind of skill set as well.
for sure. And I love that answer. And Josh, for our listeners, so I think this will really help people understand if they're that person, right? If they're that person who's struggling with the so-called soft skills. I don't think we should even call them soft skills, but let's call them soft skills for the respect of this episode. How do you identify you're that person?
I think it's really important to be, self-reflective on
Mm,
these things. So anytime you have a call or anytime you deliver a project, just having a moment after you've finished with it, thinking, what went well, what didn't go well, almost like an internal like sprint review type thing, right? Sprint retrospective type thing, but for yourself. I think it's really crucial because someone like myself, I'm constantly striving to learn and understand things in a better way. So being able to just kind of say, okay, what went well there? What could I do better? Maybe I could have been a bit more vocal in the project, and start that journey of improvement, that self-improvement. That, in my opinion, is a great way. I think it's important to be humble, particularly in the Power Platform software developer world, where there's so many people that can do the same job that you can do. But being able to understand where those gaps are in some of these skills and improve and then apply that to the next project or that next meeting you have, that's where you're really going to kind of I guess exceed your peers.
mm,
And yeah, that's definitely something I would say is just, you know, look at those opportunities for self-improvement, take them and don't kind of stagnate with what what you're doing, and you'll improve. You'll see yourself go from, up the way very, very quickly if you do that, I think.
Yeah. And Josh, has like I've recently interacting with different customers recently for people's benefit. I've gone out on my own, so it's been a bit more important for me to interact directly with customers and understand them and for them to like me because if they want to get rid of me, they can. There's no notice, there's nothing like that. It's, bye, see you, get the next guy in tomorrow. It's really easy and transactional. And honestly, I like it, but it can be a bit tough. Is there a right way to speak with stakeholders?
I would say no. Fundamentally, everyone's different. Everyone's a person at the end of the day, and I think being able to treat stakeholders, managers, whoever it might be, as a person first and build a relationship with them, that's that's the kind of key, I think. It's not treating it as a business transaction, but just trying to create rapport with people is something that really helps. Even at just small chit chat, that can have a long lasting impression. And that I mentioned, that part of the reason why I like to have my displays behind me is just because you get those passing comments sometimes from people. Oh, I like your Lego display, like, or I see you like Lego as well. And it's just building that rapport, and before you know it, that person that you've interacted with, they remember who you are because you've had a bit more of an interaction, a bit more of an impression than that person that is only really speaking when spoken to, and not really kind of getting involved in the conversation. So yeah, definitely kind of building that relationship with a customer is vital. And from my point of view, I've not ever really done anything salesy. I'm not a salesperson, never would aspire to be, but I can definitely see that kind of power if you're in that kind of sales role, trying to build relationships for the purpose of, selling or anything like that, and how important that can then become and how you can leverage that more to your advantage. I think for me, it's more just to be a bit more, less of a, what's the word, introvert, and try and be a bit more
Mm,
extroverted in how I have my conversations, because that's one of the key things that I kind of hone in on is, I'm not very much of an extrovert. I've always been introverted. Trying to build these relationships, improve how I communicate with people, that's going to help me be a bit more kind of come out my shell a little bit, so to speak. So yeah.
yeah, definitely. And and this intertwines with what we speak about, but you are and please correct me if I'm wrong, the co-founder of the Scottish Power Platform user group. True?
Not quite. I'm an organizer at the Scottish Power Platform user group. So
Organizer.
the founders were Charlie Fitzbennett and Stuart. So, um, but I jumped on board the just over a year ago now,
Hmm.
as an organizer with a good friend, Rani Colloon. And I think between the four of us, we've really kind of taken the user group from leaps and bounds. Really, it's we're getting kind of bigger numbers every event. We've got a bit of a cadence going. It's fantastic. It's a really good
Yeah.
event.
I noticed, and I asked because and apologies for getting that wrong, but I noticed that when I was new in the Power Platform space, I was seeing a lot of that user group, and that was even before I was
Okay.
following all these people on LinkedIn, right? So you're doing a great job. Um,
Thank you.
I'm always encouraging people, developers, consultants, architects, it doesn't matter where you are, leads, to start attending events. I feel like it's so important to get your face out there, to build your network. What advice would you give those people who are struggling to put themselves out there, so to speak? Go and speak or even attend.
I think don't be afraid to do it. The Power Platform community is probably one of the most welcoming in terms of, getting into things that
Hmm.
I've ever had. It's great. No one's gonna discriminate based on who you are, where you come from, what you can and can't do. Everyone takes you for who you are as a person. It's fantastic. And I think if you want to get involved in community, don't try and rush it and overwhelm yourself. And I've fallen kind of victim to that many a time, and I still do. Try and do too much at once and you exhaust yourself. But even just start by turning up to these events and meeting those like-minded people. That in and itself can be quite inspiring, and just give you that kind of nudge and that push to do something. So for me, I mean, I attended my first Spug event I can't even remember when that was. That must be coming up nearly 2 years ago. And I think I was so nervous to attend. I'd never really done anything like that before, and I was almost shaking like a leaf at the end of it when I wanted to ask a question because it just wasn't me. I felt so nervous to do it, but I just took that jump, took that leap of faith, and it paid off in the end because, obviously part of that Spug journey now, and it's fantastic to be on board and helping shape the future of the user group and seeing, regular attendees and new people come through and that really is what makes it worthwhile because you're seeing, these people that maybe turned up at their first session quite nervous and then have then turned up to two or three events and they're coming up their shell, they're speaking to other people because they recognize faces, that they're coming up to you for a chat. It's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I love that. And my first event was a hackathon in London. And it
Uh-huh.
was actually funny because I was part of the team that won that hackathon. So from then, the high was just always to go to these events, and I wanted to. But my
Uh-huh.
second kind of like official event, you'd call it, like one of the big kind of events that go on worldwide, not even just in the UK, was the Scottish Summit. So I went
Uh-huh.
there and I felt like a complete outsider. Like I was just like I don't know what I'm doing here. Felt like everyone knew each other. It was a little bit difficult to get into conversations, but I'm glad I didn't stop going. So any like a bit of advice I'd have for people who maybe have experienced that personally, I would say, just keep going. Eventually people will recognize you. Eventually a conversation will happen. Yeah, just prime yourself to go. I think the more you don't go, the harder it gets for you. So yeah, I always encourage people to attend events and just put themselves out there because I genuinely think it's a cheat code in your career. I think putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, on a whatever platform, when people know who you are, that's 80% of the work done. 20% is delivering it. You got to make sure you're doing it right. But 80% is just people knowing who you are, talking and showing off what you know. And yeah, I think that's so important for people to know and to learn from. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents on that situation. Um,
Yeah.
Josh, I think we've spoken a lot about people who are existing Power Platform consultants and developers, etc.
Uh-huh.
I kind of want to arch out an arm to the people who are probably in organizations building small SharePoint flows and small Canvas apps, three-screen Canvas apps, etc. Many Power Platform and people in the Power Platform, the biggest names, started like that.
Uh-huh.
How do you take it from that level? Because I believe it was something similar to what you were doing, probably building on SharePoint flows and forms and using Power Apps and those types of things. How do you take it from that level to building large scale enterprise applications? Are there any specific things you need to know?
I would say not to begin with. I think that the biggest attribute you can have when you're in that space to begin with is curiosity. Because you could quite happily build those really small scale flows and canvas apps for the rest of your life if you wanted to and be perfectly happy with that. But being curious about what else can this technology do, I think is the first step. So for me, it was very much a case of what is this thing? What is this common, data model thing? What can I do with it? What's the difference compared to SharePoint? And obviously that's Dataverse now. And one of the biggest things I think a lot of, consultancies, companies are looking for is, particularly at the enterprise level is, have you done anything on Dataverse? And okay, well, what's a model-driven app? Well, let me have a look at this. Okay, well, okay, I already know the Dataverse side of it, and then the model-driven app side of it. Well, that's great. You've now got another tool in your tool belt, and it just scales from there. And having the ability to fire up your own developer environment these days and say, actually, I'm gonna just try and build something. It doesn't have to be even relevant, or I just want to play around with this teeny little component and see what it can do. Um, Really starts making a difference, and there's always aspects of Power Platform or any technology really that people are going to enjoy more. Like a lot of people maybe will kind of hone in on the Canvas app side and they'll start building these really lovely apps and they look amazing, they're really great, but they'll then not have maybe the strengths in maybe the kind of more solution architecture side, and for me, I really enjoy and just kind of thrive on knowing all of the stuff, maybe not being an expert at it, but just understanding what every component can do and how it can be, built on, or how that can come together as a solution. And I think for me as well, a lot of people, well, what I've found is a lot of people will kind of shoehorn themselves into the technology. So they'll be hyper focused on something so much, they'll go down these rabbit holes, and they'll not realize that if they just stood back from that solution for 5 minutes and say, actually, is there a better way to do this? They'll maybe find that actually what they'll need isn't necessarily a Power Platform solution at all. It's something in the Azure space, it's something in the AWS space, it's something completely irrelevant, but it's going to pull in and make something a lot more comprehensive and easier to build as a result. So, you've got to start thinking about that box. So, going from that small scale one Flyer, one canvas app type thing to that large enterprise mindset. It doesn't happen overnight, and don't. I think my advice would be don't try and do too much at once. It's a journey. Take that journey, roll with it, and just learn little by little. If you're learning something new every week, every day, you're gonna end up in a really good place. But don't kind of shoehorn yourself into something. Just be open minded with it, and I think anyone can thrive in this space.
Yeah, I love that. And something I always tell my customers, and I think it's very important for them to know as well as be very realistic with myself, is the hardest part of my job is telling you when you shouldn't use a Power Platform solution, when you shouldn't do everything on a Canvas app, for example, or as you mentioned, shouldn't use Power Platform at all. There's other products out there that work very well and solve problems that the Power Platform hasn't solved yet. And that might be the best use for your customer. And giving them that right advice rather than ushering them into Power Platform when they don't need it is just going to build up so much more repertoire with that person that you're speaking to, organization, customer, even if it's your business or your organization that you're building these apps and flows for. I think it's so important to know that distinction. And I think on a piece that you said, I think a lot of people within this space, because the growth within the space isn't necessarily traditional, it can be difficult for them to adapt to like understand basic programming knowledge, for example, understanding what ALM is, things like that, and having basic data skills. But I definitely say, whilst the Power Platform is low code, and tell me if you agree with this, Josh, whilst it is low code, I think, and I say all of this because the goal of this podcast is to empower Power Platform professionals to strive for freedom, whatever that means to you, whether it's freedom of income, space, etc. And generally that comes with the higher roles. I feel like to get to those higher roles, you have to learn those things. Programming fundamentals, data fundamentals, what's a loop, what's an if statement, these types of things. And you'll definitely learn some of these things with the Power Platform. Most of them, I'd say. But sometimes you need to go a little bit deeper on data, or you need to go a little bit deeper on pro code just to take it that extra mile that you need. So I think those things are super important. Josh, just out of curiosity, like, you're now a solution architect. Do you see yourself leaning towards Dataverse more than you lean towards other solutions, and model-driven apps more than you lean towards other solutions? Or how has the landscape looked for you recently?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's probably one of my favorite phrases, to be honest. I'm surprised we've gone 23 minutes without me saying it yet. But I guess the word is it depends, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because every need, every client need, particularly in my previous role, was completely different. The technology wasn't hard and fast. It was, you know, architecting a solution based on that requirement, or what they were kind of trying to do. And you know, Dataverse wasn't always part of that conversation. I found myself in many of my projects, it was part of the conversation, and definitely is up there in terms of kind of the solutions that I was architecting being based on Dataverse. But, that's not to say it was only Dataverse. Some of the solutions leveraged things like Azure Blob Storage or SharePoint. The need was just completely diverse depending on what was required. And same in terms of, given that kind of front end design for a client, depending on what they were needing, sometimes it was the model driven app aspect. They didn't really care about the design. They just wanted to see their data in a format that they can easily digest it and do what they need to do with it. So great model driven app, here we are. There's other projects where we spent months and months building a Canvas app for them because it was a more process driven type you know data model that just wouldn't have suited a model driven app as much. So yeah, I think in that terms, you've got to be, as you said, you've got to be kind of relatively well versed in these things and in understanding what the fit is for the customer. That comes with experience, but you also need to just kind of get out there and experiment with it.
Hmm.
Um, and that way you're going to find what works and what doesn't. And I've had the blessing, I suppose, in that I've had always had the opportunity to be able to kind of proof of concept these things, to understand things a little bit more, not rush into the decision making aspect before delivering for a client. So that's helped big time.
Yeah, and on that, I definitely say that if it's not worth writing down, it's not worth doing. And I take that always with all interactions I have when it comes to discoveries, etc. I think it's so important to get things on paper, think them through, even for yourself as an architect, as a developer, as a consultant. Seeing them on paper makes you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't put a Power Automate flow here. Maybe I can just use a business rule, or maybe I can just do this, right? And just being able to see it from that landscape, I think is so important. Josh, I'd like to speak to you about AI, which is always fun because everyone's talking about AI, but I think it's an important conversation to have because we really are in an exciting time. I feel very fortunate because I fell into a career where AI is at the forefront of everything that we're doing, right? And you can argue
Mhm.
that with every career, but I think here, especially because we've got access to tools such as Copilot Studio, Azure AI Foundry, those types of things. I really think Power Platform professionals right now are in an amazing position to lead the charge when it comes to organizational AI adoption. My
Yeah.
question is, how do you see AI changing the Power Platform? Are you currently using it with anything? Any of your customers? Has Copilot been a big talking point? How has your experience been?
Yeah, I mean, AI is a massive topic, right? I'm by no means an expert in this area, so anything that I'm saying certainly isn't an expert opinion, but it's something that um, I've seen from the start of Power Platform to now. It's just completely taken the space by storm. We've gone from dragging and dropping a couple of buttons on a Canvas app to asking, an interface to build me an app, and there you go, job done. It's crazy when you think about that kind of, area that we're in now and how that's changed through time. In terms of, using it, yeah, I mean, certainly dabbled with some of the solutions, Copilot Studio and that side of things. Also, kind of outside of Power Platform altogether, starting to kind of look into that kind of vibe coding aspect and what that looks like, being able to just tell AI models like, Claude or Gemini, go and build me an app and seeing what it actually does. I mean, it blows my mind every time I do it. And, just trying to get in and about that AI side is really important. And it's used heavily in someone like Virgin Money as well. It's very much at the kind of forefront. And I think the same can be said for a lot of companies at the minute. If you're not using AI, if you're not getting ahead of the curve there, you will be left behind. And again, the same can be said for developers, architects in the space as well. If you're not actively getting involved or learning about AI, you're going to fall behind quite quickly. It's such a fast-paced environment. Power Platform always has been fast-paced, but the AI stuff is just taking it to a new level. And
Yeah.
that really is, yeah, it is something that if you're not into it, or you've maybe been on the fence about AI, or it's not really your thing, in a way, it's like tough. You kind of need to get on that bandwagon if you want to kind of stay relevant, because everything we do is probably going to be or going to have some aspect of AI at some point, right? And if you're not using it day to day, if you're not trying to learn about it at the very least, yeah, you're going to get left behind.
Josh, I can't remember the last day I didn't use ChatGPT. I don't know if you're the same. I can't remember the last day I didn't use it. I don't Google things anymore. It is so
No.
weird. Like, if I'm building a solution, right, it's very important for me to verify it from a source. So I'll generally ask generative AI, whatever it is, protected, local, but ask it, generally without giving any data or any important details out. And it will guide me in the right direction. And I can't remember the last time I call it like Google doom scrolling, right? When you're looking for a solution and you're on like page 54, you can't find it, you're seeing articles from CRM 1.0 and you're just like, what the hell is going on, right? I think generative AI sorts that out for us and it's incredible, honestly. I haven't messed around with Copilot much though. Honestly, I haven't. Like M365
Yeah.
Copilot.
It's such an interesting one, right? Because I think, I'm much the same. Like, recently I've been more on the kind of Claude and Gemini train, just due to the kind of better programming kind of models they have. But yeah, I mean, on the Copilot front, it seems to be an area that I think Microsoft are advertising, shouting about an awful lot, but it's an area that I as well find myself not using an awful lot of, which is quite interesting to think about because it's probably the most readily accessible. It's right there in your browser. It's there within Teams. It's in M365. It's everywhere, and yet I find myself using it less. But you're completely right, and I'm much the same as you. I'm using AI technologies daily, more or
Yeah.
less, to get answers to these problems that I would have spent hours Googling or trying to figure out, an old forum post on Stack Exchange from, 10 years ago and or even longer and you're like right okay is this still relevant or you go down one of those Google rabbit holes where you see someone that says oh I found the solution to this problem and then they then just don't give you the answer to it and they just disappear off the radar. You're like oh AI
Yeah.
does solve that. But I guess as well, I mean, you've probably encountered this as well, where, you're prompting it for an answer or you're saying, I'm having a problem with this, I need help with that. And the answer isn't always right or it's not always the best answer. So you just find yourself in this kind of prompt loop where you say, no, that's not what I meant, or having to refine what you're asking the model. So those challenges I think still exist. They're just slightly different now, but the end result does feel a lot more quicker when you find that solution. It's usually a lot quicker than it was when we were not using AI to get our work done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone listening as well into this conversation, who has experienced a moment like that with Josh, and Josh, I genuinely have experienced that too. As soon as I switched, if you're fortunate enough to pay for ChatGPT, specifically ChatGPT, that's the one I use, or any advanced reasoning model, if you switch to the advanced reasoning model, the results are significantly better, like amazingly so. Like Josh, I will ask it a question and it will give me resources. Like, where have you found
Uh-huh.
it? Here are the sources that I found it, right? And it'll give me a list. And even that is enough to go through and check and say, all right, this is like a verified source. I'm actually trusting it. But it's better than me Googling it. So I highly recommend to anyone paying for ChatGPT, use some of those advanced reasoning models because they are incredible. I think it's O3, the most recent one, and then O4 you have like the mini version as well, which is really cool stuff. Um, Vibe coding. Let's talk about vibe coding within the Power Platform and how our listeners can use vibe coding to make good solutions. I think I'm being very careful with my words because I think vibe coding gets looked at badly in a lot of ways. I guess, Josh, the first question is, do you vibe code?
Yeah, I've been known to dabble here and there, right? It's I've looked at, I try and keep on top of these trends and understand them. So yeah, I've done a few things, in and outside of the Power Platform space. As I said, using Claude and Gemini, I've said go and build me a to-do app or, go build me a very kind of specific app using, a common programming language and it's generated me a, React app and that kind of stuff. And it's mind blowing. And in terms of Power Platform and vibe coding. I think we're still a little way off of that, right? I think we've got the plan designer that's there, looks okay. It it's certainly getting better, and I feel like the plan designers, you can see it's an investment area. I like how it will generate a lot of the kind of user journeys and that kind of side of things, the stories and all of that. I think that's really, really good. I think it needs a bit of work in terms of like what it will actually output in terms of like apps and stuff. It's still very much here's a very generic power app for you, and it's like, well, yeah, it's okay, but it's not really 100%. It's the same app every time, with just different data behind the scenes, and you're just a bit like, well, it could be better, it could be doing more, and I think this is an area that I'd love to see, more done. Particularly when it's doing things like that app generation and things around actually creating apps that look a bit nicer, that feel tailored and individual to every question or every kind of thing that you're kind of throwing at it. Much more in line with, if you're asking Claude or Gemini, go and build me this React app, it does it, and it's very unique every time. Power Platform still just, I feel a little bit behind the curve on that one, and it's just personal opinion, but I think there's definitely more kind of ways for it to go before it kind of reaches that point. But do you know what? I think from a low code perspective, I think it's phenomenal when you think that someone that hasn't touched a Canvas app before, a Power Apps before, can just log in and say to it, I want to build an app that or a solution that manages, approvals for this process that I'm managing. Here's some of the information, I'll feed it maybe some relevant data to that process. And it just goes away and builds all of that, to a level that you could then probably say, okay, that's good enough. Maybe a few tweaks here and there. That getting started point is really good. I think that's the gap that closes between, maybe a seasoned developer and someone like a citizen developer that's maybe not done much in it before. They can just get up to that level a lot quicker. So that's where I think the plan design is really good. And then, if you needed it, you get a bit more of a developer or an architect eye on that to improve it a bit more. But yeah, getting started, I think it's a great way to do it. Gone are the days having to drag and drop, button on the
Yeah.
canvas or
Thank
that kind
God.
of thing. So,
No, 100%, 100%. And like, it does raise a few more questions around a plan designer, but firstly, a few comments on that. So I've experimented with it. It is what it is. I think that's the best way to put it. Like you type what you want from a solution, and it does its best. And it's not horrible, but it's not great. And I certainly think I could be wrong. Honestly, I'll put my hands up if I am, but I think we're a little while off that plan designer going straight into production. You know what I mean? Like I think we're quite a while off. I don't think you're going to type a solution anytime soon, and automatically trust it to go in production. I guess one of my biggest problems with the plan designer is I always ask the question. Not even ask the question. I always think in my mind, I'd be better off doing it myself. Right? I'd be better off just thinking these through. I don't trust it enough. I don't care enough for to oh look, I done it with the fancy technology. I'd rather it's done right. You know what I mean? So I think with the plan designer, that's my biggest struggle with it. But there's definitely a lot of investment, as we're all seeing, and it will get better. But let's see. You mentioned React apps, so PCF controls. Have you dabbled in create vibe coding PCF controls? Because I think that is a real cool way to blend in some of the vibe coding stuff we've been seeing, and then also the Power Platform. If it's something you haven't done, then completely okay. But is it something you've looked at?
yeah, again, I've dabbled and looked at it, and I am not a programmer by nature or trade. I don't know much of that kind of traditional, coding stuff. I've learned through the years, and I've managed to pick up some of the languages and stuff, but there's not me. So when I started to look at PCF components, that really kind of like took things up a notch, right? Because you've gone from low code, which, okay, I can create an Excel like formula to create or update a bunch of records in a data source, which is, easy enough to do, to, well, actually now you need to manage state on this component. You need to understand how, what a DOM is, what HTML is, what CSS is, what, JavaScript or TypeScript is, and you're like, whoa. And I still, stand by the fact that if you want to kind of take that step, there isn't enough out there for people that have kind of come in from that angle to really start building it. And because again, it moves so fast, you're like, okay, well, this tutorial on the Microsoft documentation is telling me about a slider that I can add in a model driven app. Well, that's great, but actually I want to build something in a Canvas app that's responsive and that's using like a virtual React component. And that information is really kind of limited. So, to bring it back to the vibe coding side of things, being able to chuck some of this stuff into ChatGPT or Gemini, that has been great. But I think it's still way off before, it's going to do all of that for you. And all these models, they're trained on really kind of like common things. So something like React, which is a very popular programming language and framework is, you're going to get a lot more tailored answers from that compared to saying, well, go and create me a PCF component. Half the time it didn't even realize what a virtual control was versus, a standard control. And it just wasn't generating the right thing. Maybe it's because my prompting was bad. I don't know, but it just felt like it just didn't have that knowledge to create a PCF component in the right kind of way that I wanted it to. But yeah, I think it's still got a bit of a way, and it would be great to see that bridge get gapped a little bit more. So as a Power Platform developer, you don't really need to know the languages as much. You can just again just prompt your AI to say, here, I'm wanting to build this. The component doesn't exist in out of the box. Go and help me create this, and it goes and does it. Where it does excel is things like, if it wants, you just want a bit of JavaScript code or that kind of thing. That's where it's really good at because it does work well. But yeah, so the
Hmm.
PCF components have never had much success, which is a shame because I really like the premise of them.
Yeah, no, it's great as snippets, but yeah, PCF controls are much more extensive. I mean, I've been looking at PCF gallery, but obviously people don't necessarily want to bring those solutions into their environments, which makes a lot of sense. They want to kind of build it natively. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping one day Microsoft bring out some sort of chatbot or something that can help us build PCFs. A PCF aware bot or something, because asking your own generative AI can be very difficult for it to piece together those different things. Um, Josh, we're coming towards the last 15, 20 minutes of the podcast, and I generally tend to lean towards personal stuff, career focused kind of advice for our listeners. What's one thing you think Power Platform professionals need to hear more of that you don't think they know enough?
That's a good question, actually. Good food for thought.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think I think it's if you're in the Power Platform space, I think it's be being more kind of community driven and focused. I think if anyone can lean into that, if you're not already, that really feels like you mentioned at the start, that kind of takes you to that next level. You start to network with people, and that network building is half the battle because you then have these allies in your network that are supportive, that kind of help and are willing to put your name out there. And as I said as well, that kind of being technical and knowing your stuff isn't the biggest part of the battle. It's all this other stuff. So if you're not involved in the community, I would definitely recommend that. At least just turning up to a user group or some of the, virtual ones if you're a bit shy or, you know, just taking small steps to get to that point.
yeah.
I can guarantee you it's going to help you in your career if you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think by far to this day, it's one of the things that I feel like I always knew, but I had to figure out for myself, right? And it was putting yourself out there, how to be heard in a place where so many people are making content. It's tough. I mean, people aren't going to listen or hear your stuff for a long time, and you've got to be okay with that. But eventually, people will listen. And
Yeah.
I feel like be consistent with what you're doing. We're not specifically talking about content, but even community work. Be consistent in showing up to events. Be consistent in making posts. Those types of things. I think giving back to the community really comes back to you in positive ways.
Uh-huh.
And if I could give our listeners one bit of advice to take from this entire podcast, if you're not doing it, put yourself out there, because it is a cheat code. Honestly, if you can put yourself out there, it is amazing. And in your mind, if you've got those barriers that say I'm not good enough, or I don't know enough, or that person knows more than me and they're already doing it, just put your own twist to it. I feel like it's so important to understand that we're all unique individuals, and we can all bring in our unique opinions and ideas on things. We all have different experiences, and no two people are alike. And it's very cliche, but I think it goes tenfold when it comes to putting yourself out there in the community. So I love that, Josh. Um, I guess when it comes to the Scottish user group, how can people get in touch with you to come and speak at those events if they're trying to? Can they just reach out to you on LinkedIn? For anyone who's listening and wants to speak, are you the go-to person, or is it anyone else?
Yeah, yeah, I would say reach out to me if I don't get back to you, or I say speak to someone else. It's you can speak to anyone in the team, but generally they'll direct you to me anyway, and that's anything kind of happening. So yeah, I'm generally the main point of contact for speakers. Yeah, it does get busy time to time. We're trying to work out a bit of a new system, so as, if I don't, if someone has reached out, anyone reaches out and I don't reply straight away, or don't feel bad giving me a nudge, right? Because that's sometimes all that I need, just to get that person back in into my mind. So, oh yeah, I'll see what we can do about scheduling you in. So yeah, just reach
Mm,
out. More than happy. If you've not spoken before, you know, we want you to speak for us. Don't don't feel afraid. We'll offer you support. Support speakers. I was supported when I first did it. We will always offer that support that you need to get you up on stage or speaking virtually to kind of really help you out there. So yeah, don't be afraid. Just reach out.
yeah, amazing. And Josh, I've asked this question for quite a few episodes, and it's around happiness, but I'm not going to ask you that because we'll take a different approach, because we're doing things new in this episode. We're doing things fresh. So, in the respect of freshness, God, I'm going to regret saying that forever. But in the respect of that, well, I'm not going to ask you what happiness means to you, but I'm going to ask you what freedom means to you. So you can have a think about it. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But Josh, what does freedom mean to you?
That's a really interesting question, right? It's very don't know the word for it, but yeah, I think for me, freedom is just being kind of happy. So you've mentioned happiness and stuff, and
Mm,
I think the two are very interlinked. To be honest, being freedom for me is being able to spend time with family, being able to invest time in my passions outside of work, being able to show up to work and be give it my all and enjoy what I do in my job and my career, and just that kind of sense of accomplishment in life, with family life and anything else. And that does feel very freeing, knowing that, you've got that privilege of, um, family and career and being able to do all of that stuff without many barriers. Not everyone's as fortunate as me, and I get that, but I'm very kind of grateful for everything that I have in life, and I think that for
yeah.
me sums up for freedom. There's always more that you want to do, but yeah, definitely, at its core, family and um definitely kind of has that sense for me of freedom and happiness.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. And yeah, you're the first person that I ask that question to, so thank you for being such a champ about it. But yeah, it's an odd one because Power Academy's mission and this podcast mission ultimately by design is to help every Power Platform professional strive for freedom. And I feel like that means something different to everybody. But I think with the nature of our role, being it, from a computer, it gives you so much more opportunity to achieve that, whether it's freedom of income, freedom of location, freedom of time, anything like that. I feel like our careers, and we're very grateful and very fortunate, as we've both mentioned, but it gives us a lot of leverage to do that. So that's why I asked the question. So I appreciate you answering, Josh. Okay, so that wraps up the podcast. That wraps up my questions. Towards the end of the episode, I always like to roll out the red carpet, Josh. I'd like to give the floor to you. Let the people know what you're up to, where they can find you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so obvious one being LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. Posting semi-frequently, maybe not as much as I'd like, but I try to keep on top of stuff. I have a blog at joshlgiles.com. You can check that out. Always trying to again just post bits and pieces on there as well. And yeah, that's probably the main ones. You'll catch me obviously at the Scottish Power Platform User Group events. So yeah, again, do check them out. And yeah, just happy to talk about anything like that anyone wants to, really. I'm certainly a very open individual, so I'm more than happy for anyone to reach out and just talk, I'll quite happily chew your ear off about Lego, camper vans, Power Platform, anything like that. I'm more than happy to talk to you about, or anything at all, really.
Yeah, love it, love it. And you heard it here first. If you've got any questions about Lego, camper vans, or Power Platform, Josh Giles is your man. So, Josh, thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest. And thank you to those at home for listening to the end of this episode. If you liked it, please hit the like and subscribe. Feel free to comment. And of course, Josh's details will be in the description. Josh, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.